Okay, hello and welcome to our Wednesday night live stream. I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that we do pretty much every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it runs for about 3 hours. So if you are new here, welcome, and if you are returning here, welcome. So how is everybody doing tonight? Anything new and exciting going on? I just realized my computer stand is not the most stable solution. So I apologize. I will work on getting that fixed for next week. Hey, James. He says, I'm good. How are you? I am significantly better this week. That one class I was taking that was ridiculously time consuming ended yesterday. Yeah, yesterday. So that is going to free up significantly more time for me. So yay for that. And I'm going to get my life organized in all this spare time that I now have. So, and I just wanted to mention to you guys, book club, before I forget, book club is tomorrow night at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The book we are reading is The Confidence Game by, I'm going to butcher her last name, so it's Maria K. something or other. It's a long name, but I'll have that ready for you tomorrow night. I hope you guys can make it. 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We normally do the last Thursday of every month for book club, but I was out of town at my cousin's wedding. So let's see. Grace says hello. Jennifer says hello, listening from Ireland. Welcome. It's always fun to see people from all over the world here. Speculator says, hi, Dana. So good to see you. Grace says, yes, organizing here too. Anne says, hello. Kamami says, hi. Bonsoir, Kamami. George says, what's up, gang? Katrina says, hello. Gareth says, good morning. George from the UK. Lots of people coming on tonight. Carol from Australia. Wow, that's just, I know I always say this, but maybe it's just because I'm easily amused, but isn't the internet so cool that we can all just so easily communicate with each other now? I don't know, that just gets me every single time. We have Sandra from Massachusetts and Denora from North Carolina. James says, I'm going to try to read more of the book, LOL, cough. Yeah, I haven't completed it either. I was listening to it in the car on my drive to and from Chicago, and her voice is very relaxing to me. I was having a hard time staying awake, so I didn't get through as much of it as I wanted to. So that'll be my project tomorrow, is to listen to the rest of the book and then get some notes typed up about it. Laura from Illinois. I was just out in your neck of the woods a few days ago. Tanitria. Life in the OC says hi from Orlando. We have Ontario, Canada here from Merzia. I'm not sure if I'm saying that properly. Katie says, hello, Dana. I am new to your videos and I'm already addicted. I've been safe from my abuser for almost a year. I have come so far in loving myself and building myself. However, my counseling has ended. Well, Katie, I am glad you are here. Sounds like you have done a tremendous amount of work in a year. So I'm just thrilled for you and for that you've been able to move just full steam ahead into your healing. This is a live stream that we do every Wednesday. I also have a support group. It's free over on, well, I have two of them. One's over on Facebook. You can find it by doing a search for Thrive After Abuse. There's the page, there's a page, and then there's the group. So you want to make sure to join the group because the group is closed. Whereas if you post on the page, other people can see it. So something to keep in mind. My website is still under construction. We are working on that, but I believe you can still join the group there. I need to check in there. It's been too long. thriveafterabuse.com is my website. And there should be a link on that homepage that'll take you to the forum there. So Gara says, I really like this room. The color is nice. Yeah, it's like a blue gray color. I sleep like a baby in here. It's so nice and dark. It's great. Oh, Hun Warrior says, Dana, what is the Facebook group for people who have moved on? I know you have two. Yes, the second group is called 365 I Thrive. And, again, it's a closed group on Facebook. So it's a much smaller group. It's less active, but I need to spend more time in there as well and kind of get that group going. But that group is mainly for people who have gotten who have gotten all of the clarity and validation that they've been seeking and who are ready to 100% focus on really rebuilding themselves and building a healthy life. So, and please don't get me wrong if anybody's listening to this. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong or bad with anybody wherever they are in stages of healing. It can just be very difficult. It can be triggering for people once they're completely out and they're moving forward in healing. It can be difficult for them to continually see stories of people that are struggling to leave and that are still right in those initial stages. So that's why we have two groups. Let's see. Sandra says, I was just on your website, but I couldn't find the book we were discussing. I thought it was Whole Again, but you just said Her Voice. The book club book for last month, excuse me, it was Whole Again. Let me just get it real quick. So it's just sitting right up there. Let me go grab it. Hold on. I'm going to keep butchering this lady's name. Okay. It's called The Confidence Game, and it's by Maria Konnikova. And this is the book that we're going to be discussing tomorrow. So 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is going to be this book. Let's see, there was a question. Okay, the second part to Katie's question was, I still find myself often struggling with wondering about my abuser, what he's doing, if he's thinking about me, if he sees my progress, etc. How can I get over these wonders? That's a good question. I think it depends on what you feel is driving that curiosity. I have found, I guess personally, and with a lot of other people, that we tend to focus on the past when we haven't built up like an interactive present or something more of a life, an engaging life in the present. So we're kind of looking back and it's just all of the rehashing and thinking about them and all of that. So that might be part of it. The other part of it is those trauma bonds are a very real thing. And plus with an abusive relationship, it's a manipulative relationship. And there's a lot of unanswered questions. And that can be difficult for somebody to just let go of. Because I think, our human brain is really wired to have answers. And if it's like if somebody tells you a riddle or a joke or half of a story and then they stop, that curiosity keeps us hooked. And it's very much like that, even, significantly more so if we've been in an abusive relationship, trying to get that clarity and closure that we'll never truly have. So if you've heard some of my videos before, you know, I'm a big fan of the website meetup.com. Meetups are generally either free or very low cost. And I encourage survivors when they're in this transition stage, which can last several years until they start moving forward into really building a life that they love, to join as many different groups that even sound remotely appealing to you, and to just re-engage in life, explore new hobbies, meet new people, really just get back out there. Meetup, it's not a dating site. It's basically connecting with like-minded people around similar interests. And there's all kinds of groups out there. There's book clubs, there's, you know, dog play dates, there's cooking, there's going to play trivia, you name it. So something to consider. Tanitria says, that's good to know about the two groups. Sometimes I'm triggered, even though I feel I am out and doing self-validation. Yeah, and that makes complete sense. One of the things I encourage, especially for people where you are, Tanitria, where they're like, you know what, I'm kind of at this in-between stage, and it's good to hear, it's to kind of be reminded of where I was and the thinking and all of the pain that's there. For some people, it kind of keeps them on track, and it keeps them going no contact, and it's a good thing, but it can be triggering. If that's where anybody is, I strongly encourage you can turn off notifications for the group, and then that way you're not, because it's the one group, the Thrive After Abuse group, is really, really active. We have, I don't even know, hundreds of thousands of new posts, and comments and interactions a month. It's really, and there's like 55,000 people in there, and it just runs, you know, 24/7. I personally go through, I approve, at a minimum these days, probably 250 posts a day, 7 days a week. So that's just me. And there's other moderators in there. So it's very active. So that can get very overwhelming to have all of that on, you know, keep getting that on your news feed on Facebook. But if you turn off notifications, that way you can just go there when you're needing some support or a reminder or what have you, and not being triggered accidentally or when you're not expecting it, you know? Carol says, it's been 5 years since I left, but being in a relationship is causing triggers as I am hyperventilating. So you bring up a really great point, Carol. Oh, actually, real quick, I just gotta, hey, Doug. You know, just thinking about you tonight, but I think about you all the time. So that's nothing new, but he says, hey, Dana, it's been years, I guess, but I needed a little refresher from your red flag series. People either love them or hate them, and I just needed a reminder that it's okay to close the door and throw the key away. Light and love for them and for all of you. Hope you're well. Oh, thank you. We miss you, Doug. And I just thank you for the lovely message and for the live stream donation. And I always just sending light and love your way. And I hope that all is well in your world as well. And yes, it's absolutely okay to close the door and to walk away from situations or people that are just not nourishing for you. So, but it's fantastic to see you here. So it's always fun. Some of the people on here, Doug being one of them, have been kind of in and out for pretty much since day one. So that's just really cool. Okay, so back to your question, Carol. She says, it's been 5 years since I left, but being in a relationship is causing triggers as I am hyperventilating. This is the thing with triggers, is there's some that we can anticipate and there's some that are just going to catch us off guard. And one of the challenges with being in a relationship again is no matter how much healing we think we've done, we won't really know until we're in that situation again. And that's the challenge with dating again. Before, for the longest time, I was really kind of subscribing to the belief of, if you're still feeling triggered, then it's just not time to date. But I now have the mindset of the odds are there's always going to just be triggers there, and there's going to be difficulties that you'll have to go through. If you're with a supportive person that you feel emotionally safe with, there's healthy communication, who understands, or at least relatively understands what you've been through, to be able to talk to them about how you're feeling, and having them, validate you, listen to you, be able to kind of work through these things, because everybody has their own triggers. Ours just happen to be um, related to abuse, but everybody's got some, either from their childhood or from just different events that have happened. And so I think if you're with the right person, it can be very, it can contribute towards a person's healing. If you're opening up to this person and they're discounting how you feel, they're invalidating you, they're minimizing it, they're telling you just to get over it, there's really not that emotional support there, then that's always a problem. But it's especially a problem for somebody who's trying to move forward and heal from abuse. So it's just like, if you were to date somebody who, let's say, has PTSD from, they were in, let's say they, I don't know, like they witnessed a crime and now they have PTSD, they're going to have their own issues. So they might really struggle with being home alone, or having the lights off, or people knocking at the door, or any number of things. And most normal, decent people, when we're in a relationship with somebody and we can see, wow, okay, this person, these are the challenges that they're facing, there's compassion there, and there's empathy, and there's understanding, and we're able to kind of incorporate what they need into our life. Like it just becomes a thing. We make it a point to not turn the light off if they're in the room alone, or just to kind of work around the things that they're sensitive about. It's just part of being, I think, just a normal, decent person. So, but those triggers will come up. And I guess my other concern would be, is it's very common for people to discount current issues in their relationship and think, oh, you know what, all the problems that I'm currently having, it's because I was in this abusive relationship before. And so any unsettling feelings I have now are only because of that previous relationship before. And that can be difficult to kind of figure out what's really going on. Like, do I have issues with men, or with commitment, or dating, or am I actually having legitimate issues within this relationship? And I think one of the best ways to kind of sort through that is, the more you learn about the more kind of subtle forms of verbal abuse, I think especially, the more aware you are. And so then it kind of erases, or I should say, it kind of dispels any confusion that might be present. Because you're like, oh, that's invalidation. Oh, that's silent treatment. Oh, that's triangulation or projection or what have you. You're more aware of what's going on because you have the words for it. My first book, Start Here, has a whole big chapter with definitions and examples, and really dives into what abuse is, and different forms of abuse, and how they come across, and all of that. So if you're somewhat, even though you've been through this, even if you're new to a lot of the terminology, that can be a good place to start. Start Here. You can find that book on Amazon. Dana Morningstar. You can find all my books. Another great read along the same lines is a book by Patricia Evans called The Verbally Abusive Relationship, that I think is also just fantastic. So those are some resources if you're interested. And just a reminder, you guys, too, with any of the books that I recommend, and book club stuff, generally your local library either will carry these books if budget is a concern, or if kind of your browsing history is a concern, depending on who else is on your account, these kinds of things. So if your library doesn't currently carry it, you can ask them to. And I know my book, I would bet that Patricia's book as well is also in audiobook format, and libraries are real tech savvy. So there's an app, at least in our area, called Hoopla. And you can get free audiobooks on it from the library. You just have to ask them. If they don't carry it, you just have to ask them. So that's another thing to consider too. So, okay, oh, thank you, Amber. She says, I usually just listen, but I wanted to pop in and tell you you were missed. So I'm glad you're back. And then, oh, thank you. And then Carol says, yes, this is what happens to me. It's emotional flashbacks. Carol says, yes, he says he understands, but I doubt that. And there have been times his behavior will trigger me. And she says, yep, you hit the nail on the head. I have done that, just that, like, oh, look, triangulation, gaslighting, etc. Yes, that really does help. Is there anything, could you give me an example of something in particular? Gigi says, yeah, I'm sorry. She says, I get triggered by the I am sorry you feel that way. Yes, I think most people do. And unfortunately, it's one of those phrases. There's so many phrases out there that people so often say where they might even be well-intended, but it just is not helpful. That is one of them. Another one would be telling another person to calm down. that doesn't help. Telling another person that they really need to forgive or move forward doesn't help. Telling another person to look on the bright side very rarely helps. There's lots of things like that. So yeah, and the whole I am sorry you feel that way, especially if a person's done something wrong, because it's a weird way for them to almost like show some kind of crumbs they care, but it's completely invalidating, and it shows a lack of accountability. It'd be much more, I think, impactful if a person were to say, to own their behavior. I'm sorry I did X, Y, and Z, instead of, I'm sorry you feel that way. Because they're putting it back on you. Yeah, that kind of stuff is maddening. Let's see, okay, Rosario says, Dana, I agree. The trauma bond is still prevalent. I've moved on with my life, but I feel sad at times. I was depressed the first year, and you said one time you were in love with someone. You thought they were... I feel like I'm missing part of your message here. That changed. Oh, I see what you're saying. You were in love with someone. I was in love with the person that I thought they were instead of who they actually were. I was in love with the fantasy. Yes. And she says, yes, that changed the game for me to think differently. Yes, absolutely. And I'm glad that helped you. And I'm glad that you brought this up tonight, because seeing it clearly and realizing that it was the fantasy. Because who wouldn't like that person, right? That person was probably fantastic. I know the few people in my life that have been abusive have all also been incredibly likable and charming and charismatic. And, you know, if you didn't know different, you would think that they were just these fantastic people. So, yeah, anybody would like that. But it's the side of them that comes out when they don't get their way, when the selfishness, the entitlement, the anger, the all of it is just that's nobody likes that. And that was the a bigger picture of who they actually were. Yeah, I guess seeing them clearly is helpful and not getting caught up in nostalgia or the fantasy of what was or what we hoped could be. Jay says, I thought I was over the narcissist in my life, but going through this divorce, I feel re-traumatized. Is that possible? Jay, is it a divorce from this narcissistic person, or um, is it a different person? I'm going to answer the question as though it's a different person, and you set me straight, okay? Um, if triggers are funny this way, because anything can be potentially re-traumatizing that can be very unrelated. And in this instance, they're very related because they were both painful relationships. And so you were in this painful relationship with this one person before. Now there's the ending of this relationship. There's a divorce. That's stressful. That's pain. So there's a lot of similar emotions that are surfacing, even if the people were very different, even if your dynamic with them was very different. It can be a lot of the same things. Uh, it's it's amazing how our brain works and what it connects and what um, can feel re-victimizing to a person. So I would just encourage you during this time to really triple up on your self-care and get as much support around you as you possibly can, especially since you're feeling re-victimized. I mean, divorce is always difficult, no matter how wanted or needed it is. So really getting the support that you need around you, and um, just doing things, ideally a dozen different things every single day for self-care, whether it's, sleeping in a little bit more, or maybe waking up a little bit early, or listening to your favorite podcast on your way to work, or taking, oh, I don't know, taking a little bit longer of a shower, or taking time to just soak in the tub, um, getting to bed a little bit earlier, whatever it might be, to just kind of feed your soul. This is the time to do it. It's times like these where the stress is high that we really need to triple up on self-care. And it's, you know, it, it's part of it. There's no point in waiting until life calms down to feel better. You can start feeling better now. Doug says, I might not be able to stay long because my tummy hurts a little, but thank you for all you do for the world. Well, thank you, Doug. And then Jack says, Doug, does it hurt from eating beetles? Haha, just kidding. Because Doug's full screen name is D Beetle Eater Doug. That's cute, Jack. Let's see, let me scroll down here. Let's see, cha-cha-cha. Katie says, my partner is so understanding in everything. He talks me through everything I worry about or I'm triggered from. I just worry about pushing him away because I get so scared. Yeah, and that's normal too. And I think that's worth having a conversation about as well. Of, I just letting him know, you know what, I just everything that you said, just right there, copy and paste that and text it to him and say, yeah, you're so understanding and wonderful. And I just adore how you're so, I just appreciate how loving and considerate and compassionate you are with me. And I worry that, um, I worry that I'm going to, my emotional needs are just going to be one day become too much. They're going to be too much heavy lifting. And I'm scared about that. There might be, um, if you have this really good rapport with your partner, saying, because the especially after abuse of any kind, it's very common for people to have this fear of, um, oh, this person's going to up and leave me, or when are they going to change? And it's just that low level of anxiety that's always there. So especially if a person already has abandonment issues or is already hypervigilant in some ways. So you could say something to them of, I'm just scared that you're going to end this relationship out of the blue. And so maybe coming to an agreement of, you know what, let's both promise each other that we're going to have a minimum of however, 3 conversations, 5 conversations about this whatever topic it is that's really putting stress on our relationship. We're going to have a minimum of, X number of conversations about this before either of us decide we're going to leave. And then that way both people can have comfort in knowing, okay, we agreed that we're going to have at least 3 conversations about this. And both people are going to be aware that we've had 3 conversations about this and that this is the stress in the relationship. That way nobody's blindsided. They don't feel like the chair is being kicked out from underneath them. And see what your partner has to say about that. And I think even coming up with like a list of promises can help if you are in a loving, supportive relationship where you both write down, these are the things that you promise each other. I promise that I'll have at least 3 conversations with you about, or 5, whatever, 5 or 7, that any concern that I have, I promise you that if things in our relationship get tense, that we'll try, I don't know, going to X number of sessions in counseling, or that will, uh, I promise to continue for you, Katie, for your partner, saying, if he could just reassure you that he will continue to be open with his feelings. And so if he is feeling it's too much, or that he has things that he needs from you emotionally or otherwise, that you'll be able to have this, you want to have this open communication with him. And I think most people that are really wanting to grow a relationship are open to that kind of thing. It's worth a shot. Yeah. And Dora says, yeah, hi, Dana. Sometimes in my new relationship, things do trigger me. My new boyfriend is not a narcissist, but some situations trigger me. Yep, absolutely. And that's very common, even just dating again can be a trigger for a lot of people, especially if when they start developing feelings for the other person. It just kicks up so many things. Is this person going to leave? How can I know if I can trust them? When are they going to change? When the first signs of conflict or disagreement surface, that fear of, oh no, are they going to yell at me? Oh, how are things going to shake out now? Oh, I hope they don't leave. All kinds of stuff surfaces when there's conflict or confrontation or disagreements. So when we talk about emotionally safe people, that's part of it. And that's really how that emotional safety grows, because it's very easy for people to come across as emotionally safe when everybody's getting along. Like, oh, this person's great. They're so likable and friendly and, they have so much in common. That's great. But where the rubber really meets the road is how are things when things aren't that way, when there is conflict and confrontation and disagreements and people are setting boundaries and these kinds of things. And it's being able to work through those in a constructive way where there's still respect and dignity present, where there's, solid communication, where things are able to effectively get resolved. Not effectively get resolved in the sense that we just keep our mouth shut, right? And then silence those parts of ourselves, or try to convince ourselves that we just need to get better at handling feeling uncomfortable. Like that's the old way that a lot of us handled these things. But the new way is being assertive to the other person. If it's really egregious behavior, then having that be a deal breaker. But if it's, um, boundary setting, or a conversation where there's unintentional hurt feelings or something happens, that both people are able to talk this out. And then when that happens, when there is that confrontation that comes up, when it's able to be effectively resolved, especially when it's done in a way where there's appreciation and compassion shown for the other person, and there's even more but even more love present for the other person, because they were open and honest, because they risked being vulnerable with how they were feeling, and they were able to stay respectful during this time. That's how these relationships grow deeper, and people start feeling more comfortable opening up to the person, because then this is how this person tends to respond when I have a problem, when I have an issue. It doesn't have to mean that the relationship has to be over. It doesn't mean that they're going to yell or scream or cuss me out, or, silent treatment or slam doors or any of that. That I can bring up how they feel. They take me seriously. We can talk about it. We can resolve it, and vice versa. That they can bring up anything, and that you're there for them. So that dynamic only works within the context of, healthy boundaries in a healthy relationship. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll down here. Jack says, Dana, do you have any data or context for narcissistic abuse or other stressors fragmenting personality in a dissociative identity disorder type of way? Dissociative identity disorder is really tricky, and I think it's one of those disorders that's often misunderstood, even by a lot of mental health professionals. And it has been, I'm not sure what I really, well, I know what I think about it, but I'm not sure. Well, okay. let me just say what's on my mind. The old diagnosis, the multiple personality disorder, that was, or people, would say they've, like Shirley MacLaine, right? Like they've got, 40 different personalities inside of themselves, and this kind of thing. There has been a lot of research really kind of debunking that. And I have worked with hundreds of people that have been through significant trauma. And I have only come across, I think, 3, maybe 4 people that have been diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder that claimed to have like multiple personalities within themselves. I don't know if I even believe that, to be honest with you. I think and I don't think they did either. I think it was more of the alters that they had were personalities that they felt the most comfortable in being around other people. I think a lot of it was attention seeking, and a lot of it was just their way of feeling comfortable. What I have seen a lot of, and this is kind of, and there's nothing, I mean, people handle trauma in all kinds of ways, and I'm not discounting that. And I think It's whatever, I think whatever works for that person is, you know, I fully support. What I have seen significantly more of, and I think this is more the route that dissociative identity disorder is taking, it's when a person is basically chronically dissociating. So they're not in reality. They're not psychotic. Like there's like with psychosis, there's a break from reality, but they're not in reality. They're delusional. Um, there's the thinking is altered, the speech is altered, the mannerisms are altered. They are not sharing the same reality. When people are really dissociating, when they're just not here, it's more of the conversation is still appropriate, that there's more of like negative, or I guess what you say, like quote unquote negative changes in behavior where you see less of certain things. So you see absences of, so like absence of conversation, they start withdrawing from society. They start, it's almost like a severe form of depression in some ways. That there's personality changes, but they're becoming kind of less of who they were before. And but like I said, that's just been my experience. And, um, and I think too, with DID, when people, have these different alters and these different sides of themselves, I think it's more important to kind of, because people understand, they process trauma differently, they communicate trauma differently, is to figure out what it is about these different sides of themselves that is safe, and where that's coming from. And that's a big part of integrating all of that into a whole. So, but anything incredibly traumatic can cause, and it does, anything even remotely stressful causes a person to disassociate. We don't like our job, people disassociate. We disassociate on driving to and from work, or kind of to and from anywhere. You kind of realize all of a sudden, boom, you're at work, or boom, you're at home, and you don't remember a lot of the drive. We all disassociate. That in itself is not a problem. It's the degree and frequency that's the problem. And if it's so extreme that a person just feels like they're not actively living their life, then there needs to be more of that focus on that reintegration part of trauma. I've heard wonderful things about EMDR in terms of this. There's trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. I think physical forms of therapy, there's trauma yoga now, and there's aerial yoga, which is, I think there's also trauma aerial yoga, can be really wonderful because it helps a person to learn how to feel safe in their body again. So these are some different approaches that can help. I would also say dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT, I would think in theory, help a person to really, the mindfulness and the processing a wide range of emotions. Okay. Okay, let me scroll up here. Yeah, Xiao Yu was saying, I missed part of the conversation, but she says, this reminds me of my sister. I've called her a narcissist before and told her what that word meant, but she just kept the act and started getting worse. There's no point. And that's the thing too, with terminology, even if she were to, oftentimes when a person even gets like an official diagnosis from a mental health professional, Everybody does this, okay? It's not just the problematic people in our life. We all do this. Whenever we get a diagnosis, we tend to steer into it. This is kind of this confirmation bias that's going on. We find out, oh, yes, indeed, you do have the flu. We're like, oh, no, I knew it. I knew I felt terrible. And then what do? We really kind of act the part of a person who's got the flu. Whereas maybe the week before we went to the doctor, we were trying our best to get up and function and not be sick. And then finally, now that we have the diagnosis, we kind of feel validated in our behavior. It's the same thing with mental health diagnoses oftentimes, especially personality stuff. And, it's just, I think in part of it, it's human nature. And part of it is it feels whenever we've got some sort of maladaptive behavior, whatever it might be, whether it's anger, excessive amounts of inappropriate anger, it's, you name it, obsessive compulsive kind of stuff. It's, I don't know, feeling overly dependent on somebody, what have you. It's very, very, very common for a person to steer more into that and then to think, oh, I can't help it. Like, this is my diagnosis. This is who I am. This is one of the reasons I always make sure to talk more about the behavior and like kind of flesh out the whole picture, because for a lot of people, getting that diagnosis or hearing that word or even looking up that word and being like, that's me, it can feel like this sense of identity foreclosure where they feel hopeless and like, I can't change anything. This is my diagnosis and this is gospel truth. And so I'm just, might as well embrace it and just not even try, basically. So yeah, especially with people that are diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder and, well, frankly, I would say any real cluster B disorder, like borderline personality disorder, narcissistic, histrionic, antisocial. Most people, I have never known one person who's been diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder who's known that they have that diagnosis for that reason, because then they tend to get even worse because they think, well, hey, I was a sociopath. So, and then they really start acting like one, and they feel entitled to act like one because they feel like they can't help it. So, and it's the same with borderline personality, although there's I don't know, you guys know how I feel about that diagnosis. Like, it's so broad, and I think it's such a catch-all, and there's such a wide range of people that have this diagnosis. For some that are truly trying to make their lives work, it can be a relief, and they really double down on examining behavior and trying to just get their life into alignment. And then there's others that are more on the extreme side of the spectrum that just use it as an excuse. Same thing with being bipolar. I've heard that excuse so many times. Oh, well, I'm just this way. And it's like, well, okay, but your diagnosis it doesn't excuse you being a jerk. So same thing with PTSD. It doesn't excuse you, you got to still own your stuff. Okay. Carol says, there are times when my partner will sit and talk and so on, but does not see his behavior as the issue and thinks I am the problem. I'm too insecure and jealous. That's always a red flag when somebody tells me that their partner's thinking that, because there generally means that here's the thing. Everybody has different boundaries. And for me, it's completely understandable and appropriate to expect, if you're dating somebody, that if they have, opposite sex friends, I don't know how this would work in like bisexual or homosexual relationships. If you guys are in one of these relationships, I'd be curious to know how this works. But in, you know, in hetero relationships, if a person has opposite sex friends, uh, to me, I think it's just kind of an issue of making everybody feel comfortable, where it's like, hey, you know what, let's go out in a group. Uh, you know, you're not being squirrely about stuff. And so, uh, you know, it's when people are in a relationship, but then they're kind of quote unquote going out with their opposite sex friends, and they're not introducing these friends to their partner, and and these opposite sex friends, people they've had sex with before, and they're texting them kind of on and off throughout the night. It's That's squirrely behavior, and it's okay to have a problem with that. You know, if a person's in a relationship, most people understand to take the other person's feelings into consideration about stuff. So I really don't think there's such a thing as, well, I guess maybe there is, but by and large, I really don't think there's such a thing as insecurity or jealousy. Um, it's boundaries. You know, if that insecurity or jealousy really spills over and it becomes, you know, completely neurotic to where, you know, you don't want this person going out of the house at all, you know, this kind of thing, that's extreme. But if it's, hey, I'm not comfortable you hanging out with your quote unquote female friends when I'm not around, totally reasonable. If you're not comfortable, this person, you haven't met this other woman, or your boyfriend is, you know, liking and hearting all of her statuses, or vice versa, or she's all posting sexy pictures of herself or stuff like that. Like it's inappropriate. So I don't know. You would be the best judge of that because I don't know all the dynamics there. Oh, that's cute, Julie. She says, I used to worry about Jack leaving because he discovered some previously unknown flaw in me. His response rocks. You can't get rid of me that easily. I think you guys are such an interesting couple. I'm just saying this, but I mean it. If you had a YouTube channel, I would totally subscribe. I'm so curious to know the dynamic because you guys seem to just be so open and have such great communication about things. And it's just really cool. Just throwing that idea out there. So if you're ever thought of having a channel with you and Jack, I think a lot of people would be interested in watching. Carol says her partner gets defensive and then threatens to leave. Uh, let's see here. Maria says, the covert narcissist in my life wasn't verbally or physically abusive, but he messed me up. The the level of deceit and that breach of trust and the maliciousness and the lack of empathy and the lack of remorse and the cold, calloused behavior can be terrifying for another person and can cause PTSD. So, you know, my situation, well, with both of the two main problematic men in my life. I mean, I dated one guy when I was in high school. You've heard me talk about him. He was very overt. He was, you know, his nickname was Psycho, and that was a very appropriate nickname for him. He was completely unpredictable, erratic, aggressive, um, controlling, scary dude. I never dated anybody like that since. Then, you know, fast forward, the two other men in my life were both Prince Charming the whole time, until I found out that it was this really, well, the first guy, I actually just came across the picture again tonight. That's weird. The first guy was absolutely wonderful. Brought me coffee in bed every morning. We went for long walks. We talked about everything. I thought he was my best friend. We had this, what I thought was an amazing relationship. And then I found out it was all a lie, and that he basically thought I was getting all this money from my divorce, which I wasn't. And even though I had told him that I wasn't, because I was walking away from pretty much everything. And I really feel that he was trying to kill me once he realized that I wasn't going to be the cash cow that he thought I was. And when I realized it had been nothing but lies, and I spoke to his ex-wife, who had just told, she was only married to him for 3 months when she found out he was doing the same thing and was a pathological liar, she just told me, honey, run, don't look back. And I listened to her, and I'm really thankful that I did. But it was incredibly difficult because, we all think that we can see a dangerous person coming. And for me to realize that I could have what seemed like a wonderful relationship with somebody and not even realize that this person, I'm pretty sure, was trying to kill me, is terrifying. And it took me a really long time to move past that to the point where I could really even function and trust other people. But it took a long time for me. So I get it. I mean, I think it's just coming face to face with that level of evil is traumatizing, and understandably so. So, okay, let me scroll down here. Cha-cha-cha. Xiao Yu says, yeah, oftentimes narcissists take everything as an attack, even if you're apologizing or just complimenting them. Yeah, there's some that are so, I don't even know what the word would be, insecure, paranoid, um, guarded, defensive, all of the above, where anything that's incoming to them, they take as the way that it's not intended. And we all sometimes take things the way that they're not intended, but for certain personalities, it's just due to their own insecurities. You could say, hey, that's a really nice shirt, and they could think, oh, you're being sarcastic, and you think my shirt is stupid, and you think I'm stupid, and now you think I'm a fool. You know what I mean? Like, it just goes to this level of, wow, okay, that's not what I meant at all. And those kinds of people, you just have to, I really feel like you just really got to distance yourself from, because it's a no-win situation. And you got to kind of know when to walk away from conversations that you just know are going to be loaded and not go anywhere. Ricky says, hey, did anybody ever hear the, well, you brought this upon yourself phrase? Yes. From people who have never lived it and don't understand, and who don't understand. Yes. And I try, if I've eaten, like if my blood sugar is stable and I'm at a good place emotionally, I try to use situations like that as like teachable moments. But those kinds of things, it just depends on how grounded I am within me, because those types of comments can very quickly trigger me, and I can become very reactive, and either well, especially if they're aimed at my own situation, but even if they're talking about somebody else, it just brings out the mama bear in me. I had a recent conversation the other day with a therapist, a woman who's been a therapist for 30 plus years, and she we were talking about the Epstein sex trafficking case and these young girls that had gotten, well, probably girls of all ages, but young girls that had gotten caught up in it. And she was saying, you know, well, what were they thinking? Like some of these were 14. And what did they really think, that they were just going to go over there and give these guys massages? And, you know, they brought this upon themselves. They were so gullible. And I just was livid at that, you know, because yeah, it's easy to armchair quarterback, to Monday morning quarterback these kinds of things when we have all of the details in front of us and we know how the situation ended. It's a lot different if somebody who's very wealthy approaches, you know, 14, you don't know anything about anything. Like, you're naive at 14. You're naive at 24. Many of us are naive at 34 and 44 and onwards, right? But most normal, decent people don't have this on their radar, that if somebody, and who knows what they were doing to kind of lure these girls in, most normal, decent people don't even have that on their radar, that, oh yeah, if I go meet this person, it's going to wind up into, you know, forced, you know, human trafficking. I mean, come on. Or forced, you know, coerced sex or anything like that. I could see them, you know, oh, or these going to be these famous people there, and there's going to be other girls there your age, and you know, hey, it's, you know, it's $100 or it's $500, and all they want us to do is just kind of hang out with them, and you know what I mean? Nobody knowingly gets into life-destroying situations. You know, there's some sort of hook. I just was so livid. And so anyways, this woman and I were going back and forth about this for a while, and you know, she kept saying, she's like, well, I'm not trying to victim blame. And I'm like, well, but you are. That's exactly what you're doing. That's the problem. Because it's easy for other people to look in and say what they think they would do. We all think that we would be able to spot a con or, you know, a problematic situation. My third book, The Narcissist's Playbook, talks about that in depth. It's exactly that. This is because we think we'd be able to spot a problem for what it is. This is how people get into hot water like this, is because we all think, you know, in that book, and I talked about it before in the live stream. There was this one night I couldn't sleep, and I was, you know, you go down all these different holes on YouTube, like wind up watching all these strange videos. And I was watching one about the tsunami the one it killed, I forget, like 250,000 people or something in Indonesia a handful of years ago. And what was so interesting to me, so I'm watching this footage, and it's these foreign vacationers filming how strange everything looks. The water had receded off the beach, so there's just this wet, sandy shoreline pretty much as far as the eye can see. Everybody's confused. Where did the ocean go? You know? And then off in the distance, there's all these locals that are running. And so then these tourists think, well, you know, if the locals are running, they must know something we don't know. And so then they start running as well. And then you can see the wave growing in the distance and realizing it's a tsunami. And of course, you know, fast forward, it ends up killing, you know, 250,000 people. What was interesting was the comments in that video of people saying that they should have known, that that was a tsunami, and why didn't they know? And, you know, oh, look at how dumb they are, which is ridiculous, because how many people do you think, here's the thing, how many people do you think really know what a tsunami looks like? We all have this idea of what a tsunami is, right? Like this massive wall of water. But by the time we see that massive wall of water, it's too late. How many people realize that a tsunami, it's actually the water retreating, the ocean retreating? You know, it's, there's all these other early warning signs that this is a tsunami before you actually, that wall of water is right there. Had I seen what they saw, I would have never thought in a million years that that was a tsunami. because I had a vision of it in my head as something totally different. It's the same thing with abusive relationships, cons, um, online scams, phone scams, all kinds of stuff like this. And so I think it's just so important that we realize that this kind of stuff can happen to anybody. And this is another thing I get a lot of um, emails and messages about, where people are so upset because they're like, I can't believe this happened to me. I'm an educated person. I've been a trial attorney for 20 years. I've been a police officer for 20 years. I'm a therapist. How did this happen to me? I'm really a no nonsense CEO type personality. Um, how did this happen to me? And because this stuff's not taught, it's easy for it to happen to anybody who's not aware of it, who's not looking for it, or who's not able to identify it, I should say. So yeah, I guess that was kind of a long-winded answer, but yes, I have heard that phrase more than once and do my best to address it. Oh, well, thank you, Agatha. She says, it's a little gift, Dana. I so value our friendship. I just worked on 4 chapters. Yes, I could hear them dinging as you were uploading them to Dropbox. She says, I would take you out for dinner to celebrate you, but maybe you can grab a coffee and a piece of cake for yourself. Hugs and kisses, Agatha. Oh, well, thank you. Yes, today is my birthday. It hasn't felt like my birthday because I've been running around catching up on life all day today. But yes, I will definitely go have like a little cupcake or something this weekend. And thank you so much. I appreciate the gift. Yeah. Carol says, yeah, my partner says, do not let your ex control you. My partner thinks I'm self-sabotaging. And she says, and I tell him that doesn't help. Those kind of statements are really invalidating. And that would be very, I think, irritating for most people. And because here's the deal, I don't believe that there's any such thing as a small issue. If something's an issue for you or for anybody else, it's an issue. And it's worthy of being taken seriously and discussing, especially if their behavior is erring on the squirrely side of things. I have found by and large that most people, unless they're extremely personality disordered or on drugs, most people, if not all people, they are not just inherently insecure and jealous. That there's behavior that the other person in their life is doing that they're not okay with. And the other person, it doesn't want to change their behavior. And so they're saying, oh, it's nothing, you're making a big deal out of things, blah, blah, blah. So like what I was saying before about, hey, you know what, if you're going to have, and whatever the situation is, I'm fine if you're fine. And some people aren't even fine with their partner having opposite sex friends. And that's okay too. That's where your boundary is. It's okay. For example, it's becoming more and more common where people that are divorcing on good terms still, especially if there's young children involved, spend time as a quote unquote family together. They're having holidays together. They're doing these things together for the kids. It's totally okay if you're dating somebody and that's the dynamic they have with their ex, to be like, you know what? I'm not okay with that. Doesn't mean that you're doing anything squirrely. Doesn't mean that you're sleeping with your ex. Doesn't mean that you have feelings. Doesn't mean that she has feelings. It just means I'm not okay with that. And so I wish you well, but I don't want to, I'm just not okay with that. So that's it. That's it. If you're not okay with something, you're not okay with something. Mickey says, I've been single for so long now after the narcissist, I'm feeling like I want to try dating again. I'd love to know the feeling of being treated right. I've never had this. Yes. And I think on the flip side of that, a big part of knowing when you're being treated right is also being aware of when you're being treated in a way that you're not okay with. That's so incredibly key, because a lot of problematic people can come across as Mr. and Mrs. Right, and they can be very charming and charismatic, and can all the love bombing and showering their this new person in their life with attention and affection and all of these things. And if we've never had that before, or if it's been a long time since we've had that, we'll eat that up because it feels amazing. But if a person, and it feels healthy, that's what can be so scary about these relationships, that if they do turn problematic later on down the road, that's what so many people get hooked on, of I don't want to be hurt like that again, but I also want to be loved like that again. So trying to reconcile those two sides. But if you know when you're being treated in a way that you're not okay with, it makes dating a lot easier, because then you're better able to navigate boundaries along the way and address them and be assertive, and to know when to walk away. When just stuff is just not okay with you. Oh, thank you. Ma Under, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Monder or Ma Under says, God bless you, Dana, and happy birthday. Well, thank you, and thank you for the live stream donation. I appreciate it. Let's see here. Yeah, Watcher says, I'm glad that there are groups like this. We can help heal each other by sharing our experiences and knowing that we are not alone. Yeah, I agree. I think that's the benefit of groups in general, is that it helps to decrease levels of embarrassment and guilt and shame. And it can show people, that there is hope after this. You can rebuild your life into something even better than before. And that hearing the stories, the experiences of other people can be incredibly validating, and realizing that not only are you not alone, but that you're not the only one who has experienced something like this. And oftentimes when people are sharing their stories or their experiences, it creates a lot of aha moments for people. Like, oh my goodness, I didn't even realize that was a problem, or I always thought that was weird, but I always thought it was just this person. And it helps them make connections too. So I love groups. I'm such a big believer in this. The other benefit of groups is also hearing the input from a wide variety of people that have been there, done that. That's the challenge with one-on-one kind of sessions, is especially, and I don't get me wrong, I definitely believe that there's a time and place for counseling, or one-on-one kind of stuff. But it's very, very challenging when a person has gone through verbal or emotional, like more like the quote unquote hidden forms of abuse. Because if they're with a counselor who maybe is not familiar with it, or they're not identifying what happened, because it's difficult, because oftentimes the person doesn't know what happened. They just know that they have anxiety and depression. They don't know what's wrong, or anger, and they don't know what's wrong with them. And so it's very easy for the mental health professional to go down the wrong rabbit trail, not even realizing that there had been abuse. So I think the more people that have been there, done that, it can give a more complete understanding of what happened, and give the person more, resources and validation. So yeah. So I thank you guys for being here and supporting each other and doing all this, because it really does help tremendously. Oh, thank you, Martha. So that's happy birthday. And I very much appreciate you. Have a Starbucks on me. I will definitely do that. Thank you so much for the kind wishes and the live stream donation. I will have well, it's summertime. I guess I'll have an iced chai tea. Those are so good. And M. Mars sends a cute little emoji, says, you're number one. And a nice live stream donation. Thank you so much, you guys. I really appreciate it. Oh boy, this kind of feels like a loaded question here, but am going to address it. Aries says, do you think narcissistic personality disorder is worse in the Black community with so many young girls and boys being raised by single mothers? I think if we take out the Black community or even the single parent, I think the issue is it's much bigger than that. I think it's across the board. It's just a big problem. Even if a child is raised in, you know, a two-parent home, if so much of personality disordered stuff comes from dysfunction, and a person can have a functional one-parent home, and they can have a dysfunctional one-parent home, and they can have a functional or dysfunctional two-parent home. So a lot of it is kind of what they're raised around is really going to kind of set the stage for the personality that develops. And this is why I just don't like generalizing, I just don't think that skin color plays such a part in it. Even single parents play such a big part in it, because oftentimes, with single parents, you also oftentimes have more parents in the mix that are kind of, it's the whole, like, it takes a village to raise a child kind of a thing. So you have more people that are involved in raising the child, which can be more beneficial. I guess my whole thing is it's more about the quality and character of the people that are around the child than anything else. Because there's lots of people that stay married and they have, there's one abusive parent, and the damage that's done. I think it's very difficult to raise a completely healthy, well-adjusted, functional person in a really dysfunctional environment. At the end of the day, I think the solution to a lot of this is more early education in terms of parenting classes, in terms of curriculum in schools, with how to handle emotions, how to understand how our brain works. This stuff's not taught, and so it's just difficult. I just lost a hold on. Hi, Dana. I had this screen up and there was some chat messages or live stream donations I didn't get to. Cad Red, thank you. Says, thanks, Dana, with the live stream donation. I appreciate that. And I believe there was one from Grace, and I don't know how I can go back and look. So hold on just a second. Let me see if I click this button, what happens. Yeah, nothing happened. So, oh, there it is. Grace says, happy birthday. Well, thank you, Grace. I appreciate that. Yeah, and Agatha says, I think it's more from watching shows like the Kardashians than being raised by a single mother. I'm raised by a single poor mother, and I am not a narcissist. Yeah, a lot of it. There's the, if a child grows up spoiled rotten and entitled, then you get like a little Joffrey on your hands. If you have, it's so much of it's role modeling. Is this child taught manners? Is the child taught respect? Is this child taught, teamwork and how to work with? Are they socialized? There's so many children. The older I get, the more horrified I am by what I see and the way that kids interact with adults. I'm horrified. It's just not, that would have never been allowed when I was growing up. Even little things, interrupting adult conversation, or I was standing on the sidewalk the other day talking to somebody, another adult, and these kids ran right between us. And I just thought I would have never dreamed to do that as a child. It's just disrespectful. You just go around. Little things like that. There's just not that there. We live in such an instant gratification and entitlement society that I think that's a big, it's a big problem, and it's a big part of it. So, but yeah, I guess early education I think is the way out, because if kids can understand, um, with understand their emotions, understand how their brain works, understand, because when we are acting subconsciously, when we have outbursts of anger, when we have emotions that we don't understand, or responses that we don't understand, or fears that we don't understand, because the stuff's not readily taught, it's confusing. And then when people get confused, they either get scared and they stop talking about it, or they try to control it on their own, which I think 9 times out of 10 just leads to more maladaptive behavior trying to cover it up. So they realize there's a problem in one way, but then they self-soothe in another way that's a problem. And then you just have, then people are just spinning in circles and nobody's really getting anywhere. So, um, yeah. Yes, I agree. Agatha says, especially smaller groups are great. I really want us to be able to create this protocol for small support groups. I agree. It is on my list of things to do. I was just thinking about that again the other day, of how needed that is. And Agatha was saying, I love this group most because it doesn't have this sensational atmosphere like other groups. Yeah. Well, I'm glad. Thank you. I'm glad. You guys are the ones that set the tone of the group, um, and I love it. So I think other people love it too, because it does feel like a welcoming, relatively safe place to just explore to ask questions and to explore feelings and to get support and all of that. So yeah. Jennifer says, my aunt had 3 kids with her husband and they divorced like 15 years later. He is still in touch with the family and is still treated like a member of the family. And she works for him, and her new boyfriend has met him and they're on good terms. Sometimes people just aren't a good match, but don't need to necessarily have a toxic breakup like you see. Yeah. Uh, I've seen this from other people. For example, um, I've seen people that where their exes go to their birthdays and that they celebrate holidays together and all kinds of stuff. And I think if that works for them, that's great. But I also understand. There's 2 acquaintances, I guess you could say, of mine. They were married. They have a daughter. They divorced under, it was very horrific, extreme circumstances, because her mother was incredibly manipulative and just almost kind of, I would say, evil, just very destructive. They divorced. Now they are very, very close friends, and they go out every single Friday night. They have drinks with, a group of people. There's no way anything would happen between them again. Like, they're both just so done, but they get along famously. And they both date other people, and it's just not a thing, but they get along famously. And if that works, that's okay. But uh, it's up to their new partner if that's okay with them. And if not, then what does that mean? Like, what's going to happen? So, Watcher says, my opinion, our birthdays are shoved down our throats to keep us in an infantile state of mind and maybe even stunt our emotional IQ. It's self-celebration and ritualistic in nature, centered around a date. I can see what you're saying to a certain point. There's definitely this degree of materialism around birthdays and in this level of narcissism, you know, it's all about me kind of thing, that is definitely a turnoff for me as well. Uh, I guess I look at birthdays. Well, I guess I look at my birthday. I don't want to begrudge anybody else from, you know, doing that kind of stuff, because it's just kind of our culture, and it's just what's expected. But I view birthdays more of, um, just kind of a day that we can give thanks because we're here. We're here another year. I think it was was it Mark Twain? Somebody had said something along the lines of, we shouldn't begrudge, or we shouldn't uh, feel bad for getting old, or get upset about being another year older. It's a privilege that's denied to far too many. And I really liked that of, you know, we get so hung up on, oh, I'm another year older, or, oh, this is terrible, or oh, this or that. And it's, you know, we get to be here. So yay for that. Another, you know, another year. Oh, well, thank you, Doug. He says, I was 70% sure it was Dana's birthday, but I didn't want to say anything in case I was wrong. I also didn't want to say anything because it wasn't my place. I hope you have a wonderful year. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, it's okay. I put my birthday out there on the internet, and some people, we were talking about that as to whether, you know, kind of a safety thing, but it's been out there. It's like, you know, people know. So it is what it is. Cha cha cha. Oh, Gareth says, what, your birthday is the 1st of August? It's technically July 31st. So, okay, scrolling up, scrolling up, scrolling up. Oh my goodness. Thank you, everybody, for the birthday wishes. I was not expecting that. Carol said, do you believe you can be brainwashed without knowing it? As I have people say, I let him abuse me by staying. Absolutely, Carol. When people are being brainwashed, they don't realize it. So I would say that, you know, 99.9995% of the time, they don't realize it. The people that are aware that, ooh, there's some really uncomfortable brainwashing going on here, those people have generally lived through something like this. And so they're able to spot it. But the vast majority of the time, no, brainwashing comes across like there's no problem, you know? So it's, I mean, and it happens at all levels. You know, for example, you know, Nazi Germany were all of the Nazis just evil, murderous people? No, absolutely not. They got caught up in the brainwash. You know, I think probably the vast majority of them were decent people that got caught up in this ideology that sold them, that was telling them everything that they needed to hear at at that time in their life. You know, it spoke to their vulnerabilities as a country and as individuals. And it was kind of this group think that was going on. And it's a lot easier, I think, to have scapegoats for issues than it is than anything else. And it kind of got caught up in this mass hysteria. So, I mean, that's like an extreme example, but it can go to that level. More, I think, smaller examples, you know, definitely abusive relationships. There's a lot of brainwashing involved. I think there's some questions you can ask yourself to kind of see if kind of where your thinking is, would be to ask yourself, you know, if you had a friend or a daughter or son, depending, that was in a relationship like this, how would you feel about it? Would you be horrified? Would you be sad? Would you be concerned? Because odds are, if you are, then there's something wrong there. And, um, you really want to be able to be in the kind of relationship where you hope, boy, I really hope that somebody else that I love would be in a relationship just like this. So if you're in a relationship with somebody who doesn't feel emotionally safe, that you can't rely on, that you really can't trust, that is invalidating and minimizing and, has all kinds of stuff that just doesn't make you feel emotionally safe, that relationship is just not going to work out. Or at least hopefully it doesn't work out. Unfortunately, what tends to happen is then people spend all of this time trying to convince themselves that it can work out and that it should work out and that they're the problem. I can't tell you how many people I've come across in the support group and in person who their main issues are anger, anxiety, and depression. And they're there because they have this anger issue and they think it's them. They think that they're jealous. They think that they're insecure. They think all of these things. But then really you kind of get more into it and it's, oh no, actually your partner has all kinds of squirrely behavior. Nobody and that has healthy boundaries would be okay with that. They're trying to convince you that you're the one with the problem. And if they're if they're doing stuff that's squirrely, it's normal and appropriate to have an issue with that. So, okay, let's see. Let me scroll down here. Agatha, let's talk about the protocol for small group stuff tomorrow. And let's schedule that so we can hammer that out because I would like to get that going. David says, do you know anything I should do with a pregnant ex who's a narcissist? I guess there's a couple questions. I would want to know, is it your child? I'd want to know for certain if she's problematic. There's a very you know what I mean? Like I just would, if she's, the child is yours, then there's no need to do more on that. But if there's any question, I would get that looked into. I would start kind of thinking about what kind of dynamic that you want to have with her and with the child, and then kind of start reverse engineering it. So I'd speak with an attorney, and come up with some sort of parenting plan, and just think about like what you would like to see happen, and not wait until the baby gets here to then figure all that out. That's going to be incredibly stressful, and then all of that. So I guess that's what I would do, and just anticipate her being difficult and the behavior, basically all of the behavior that she's had before, expect that to continue. So the more you can anticipate and live in reality, not fantasy of, well, hopefully someday, maybe down the road, this will change her or things will be different. If you can anticipate, this is how she's always acted. This is probably how she's always going to act. I'm just going to anticipate that she's going to act like this. Then you can start taking back some degree of control and interacting with her in a way that's more responsive instead of a way that's more reactive. Because when we're continually, and it can take a long time for a person to really, 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 really understand this type of like this high conflict type of personality type. And until we get there, and this can take years for many people, until we get to that point where just continually our jaws just drop open. We're continually knocked off guard every single time they do something outrageous. But when we get to that place of acceptance of, you know what? Yep, that that hateful, hurtful person acted in a hateful, hurtful way. Of course they did. That's how they act. And we're no longer caught off. We might still be caught off guard by it, but we're no longer terribly shocked by it. Like, yeah, of course they acted that way. That's how they act. Instead of hoping that they're going to act appropriate or, anything other than how they've shown us in the past. And then if they do act appropriate, then we're pleasantly surprised, but we're not expecting it. You're kind of erring on the side of caution and putting some plans into place. I would also encourage you to keep a paper trail of everything. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised by that, Jennifer. She says, I don't know what the numbers and statistics are, but it's possible that the media blows up the whole one-sided racial thing in an effort to divide us even more. Yeah, that wouldn't shock me. It's been my experience that, and again, this is maybe the like a stereotype of the on the opposite extreme. It's been my experience that uh, Black families, even single Black parents, that all of the children that I have encountered, and like that I can remember noticing this kind of outrageous behavior, it's been generally, well, oftentimes many like just single parent homes or Black families that their children are the ones with manners. I've noticed it a lot more with white families that their kids run the show. The kids interrupt, the kids are completely catered to. The kids, treat their parents terrible. They cuss at them, they throw a fit, they do all of that kind of stuff. I have not seen that really outside of white families. So just saying. Let's see here. Yeah, it's another thing difference I've noticed is with white families lately. This has just been a thing like within the past 5 or 10 years of, and again, I know broad sweeping generalities here. White families, I've noticed, their children tend to refer to adults by their first name. And again, every single person that I know that's of color, their children don't. Their children will refer to me as like Miss Dana. And there's that level of respect there. So that's another big difference. My dad and I were just talking about this over the weekend of how I'm now 42 years old. I'm 42 years old. I still call my aunts and uncles Aunt so-and-so or Uncle so-and-so. I would never dream of calling them by their first name, but that was just how we were raised. And even though they have since told me, oh, you can just call me, my first name, it doesn't feel right because they've always been Aunt so-and-so or Uncle so-and-so versus other relatives, their children just call me Dana. And I don't think I like that. I just feel like it's very kind of off-putting. Like I love their children, but we're not peers, and there needs to kind of be that level of respect there. So maybe I'm just old. I don't know. But things, they are changing. That's for sure. Okay, let me scroll down. New Beginnings says, when is it too late to go no contact? I've been gray rock for 10 months, but won't. Oh, I think, but want to go no contact. Is it too late for me? And Watcher has a great response to that and says, it's never too late to take the plunge and go no contact. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but groups like this sweeten things up. You are not alone, unlovable, or undeserving. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's never too late. For so many of us, it takes years, if not decades, to really fully understand I just cannot have this person in my life. It's just emotionally exhausting. And, um, I, this just is not working at all. It's very one-sided and I'm just drained and it's a one-way street. Uh, and I just need to go full no contact because this person just does not respect my boundaries. We have nothing in common. I dread, whenever they try to contact me, it's not working. So yeah, it's never too late. We all set our boundaries when we're ready to. And getting in tune with your boundaries and realizing just where those lines are and what you need to do to act on them. It's such a personal thing, and every person for a lot of us, we have to kind of reach our breaking point, at least at first, before we start taking the action that we need to take. And then through time and through practice, we get better and better and better at it. So there is no, wrong answer. It's more about just timing. Like you'll know really based upon how you feel in this dynamic, if you need to get more space or not. If a situation if it's emotionally exhausting, if it's draining, if it's, if the people that we have in our life really ideally need to be nourishing, because otherwise, what are we doing? You know, at a minimum, these situations, there's always, of course, people are going to have to be just, have to tolerate like certain coworkers or maybe neighbors or friends of friends that we're not just too fond of. But by and large, like the people in your inner circle, this is where we go to get fed, emotionally, and to be heard and validated and understood and loved and appreciated. And then we ideally give all that in return. So there's this sense of mutuality within our inner circle, where it's a place that everybody that's in there, it's a feel good place. And people are going there to get support, to share their victories, to mourn their losses, to just have this wide range of emotions with this person, these other people. Let's see. That's a great way to put that, Julie. She says, being brainwashed is like being ambushed. Once you know it's happening, it can't happen anymore. Yeah. And Jennifer says, even the regular German citizens were brainwashed. Yeah, this is how this stuff happens. And it can happen to anybody. And I think it's just so important that we always realize that we don't, because again, it's so easy. Again, we'll take Germany for an example. It's so easy to think that, oh, well, those were just bad people, or that would never happen to us, or it was all Hitler's fault. It's so important that we broaden our horizons and understand how these kinds of things happen at a mass level like that, because it could very easily happen again. And it will continue to happen again until people learn the right lessons. And it's easy to get caught up in stuff like that. Because again, this stuff's not taught. And if people were better taught about, and I have found too, that when people start learning about this and when they start really stepping into themselves and becoming grounded in their boundaries and standards and deal breakers, and they really get in tune with their emotions and they realize, okay, you know what, these emotions have messages for me. And oftentimes it's signs that there's some sort of imbalance that needs to be adjusted. And we just change our relationship with ourselves. It doesn't take a person that long to have massive positive change in their life once sometimes it's just like five different aha moments of, oh my gosh, I didn't realize this. And then their life becomes radically more balanced and it starts working for them. So it's not like it needs to be like this huge, massive educational undertaking. It's basically, it's just reminding people of who they are. Because, just letting people know, like, you have what we call intuition, like you have these human instincts. I think that's a better term because it sounds less woo woo. Like you have we all have these instincts, and we're very complicated creatures. It's sort of like we're like we have I don't know, we're a really like a very high end sports car that we don't know how to drive. And once we understand that, we're equipped to actually do more of what we're capable of doing, if that makes sense. So, okay, let's. Okay, hold on. Let's see. Amani. Says, hi, please, guys. I'm Amani from Morocco. I was in research these days about this topic because I've been cheating on my boyfriend for 6 months now, and it really makes me tired. The lying and all of the problem is that I am lying to the other guy also. I've never lied in my whole life like this. I've just turned 20 years old. I think I'm narcissistic. I'm exhausted. I feel ashamed and guilty for hurting the both of them. Everybody, maybe I am a pathological liar and a serial killer. I read that you can't fix this. I'm really afraid. I really do love my boyfriend and care for him. Please, I've never told anyone this. You're the first person in the world who I told this. I am from Morocco. Sorry for my bad English. Should I let them go or should I tell them? You are people such a help to me. I have no one to talk to. Just by writing this down makes me feel sort of, I don't even know. Just thank you so much. Well, the fact that you're experiencing guilt shows that you have a conscience and shows that you're not a narcissist. And um, sometimes things happen, and sometimes people get into situations that they didn't intend to. It sounds like that's where you are, and so it sounds like you need to make a decision. So at a minimum, my advice would be to break it off with the first guy, because if your relationship with the first guy was that fulfilling, the second guy wouldn't have had a chance. So you might love and care about both of them, but um, when people tend to, especially if you're lying to both people, it almost sounds like there's bits and pieces of both of them that you're trying to cobble together into like one person, and that's why both of these things are continuing. So I think it's, getting clear on yourself with yourself of uh, why, how, being honest with yourself of why you're doing what you're doing and which of these relationships needs to end, and possibly both of them do need to end. But if you're really into, let me scroll down while I'm talking in case you're typing more stuff here. Sometimes when a person, yeah, and Jennifer says, and 20 years old is also very young. Yes, it is. I agree. When a person finds themselves in two different relationships like this, and if you're like, you know what, I don't really know how I got here, and I feel terrible, and all of this, Yeah, I would encourage you to really get to Jennifer was saying getting to know yourself better, knowing what you want. My guess is sometimes it's people struggle with ending a relationship because they are really, really uncomfortable with confrontation. I've experienced that. Um, and I didn't realize what that was for the longest time, that it's that just debilitating fear of confrontation, even though I mean, the alternative is to cheat, like, that's terrible, right? So, it's not protecting this other person from pain, it's not avoiding anything uncomfortable, it's just postponing it. So, I guess kinda getting clear is why? Why are these 2 relationships going simultaneously? I wouldn't tell them about the other person. There's a couple reasons why. Mainly because when a person finds out that they're being cheated on like that, it can destroy them. It can destroy their faith in relationships. It can I just don't think that there's any benefit to that. So I would end it in a way that still that does not hurt the other person. Um, just letting them know that, this however you want to say it, but just valuing their feelings and um, I guess breaking up with them in a way that you would want somebody to break up with you. Okay, let me scroll up here. And that's good advice too. Bonnie says, I say forgive yourself first. Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of people uh, forget that step along the way, but it is important to realize, you know what? Sometimes we find ourselves making bad decisions and uh, or acting in a way that we really don't like. And it is important to be accountable and to work to rectifying these situations, but then to also realize that you're human. And sometimes we kind of paint ourselves into a corner and it can be really difficult. So, treating yourself with compassion and just squeezing out all of the lessons that you can from this situation, and hopefully it'll never happen again. So, okay. And then interested says, maybe you like this sensation seeking with the cheating. I was there at that age too. Yeah. For some people, there's lots of different reasons people cheat. Some people, uh, they enjoy that. They enjoy the sneaking around, the thought of getting caught, and um, or just the thrill of being wanted by multiple people and all that. It doesn't sound like that's, and I forget her name. Oh gosh, let me scroll up. That's way up there. Gosh. Amani. Okay, that's what I thought your name was, but I wasn't 100% sure. It doesn't sound like where Amani's coming from just because of the sheer amount of um, guilt that she's carrying. Sounds like she just kind of fell into this and um, yeah, and is still in these 2 different relationships for what reason, I'm not quite sure. But hopefully this conversation and in these things is um, kind of helping give her the clarity and the validation she needs. Holographic multiverse says, I am a divine being equal to all divine beings. I expect to be treated as such. I'm a doctor and I don't need anyone to call me anything, but I do expect kindness and regard. Yeah. I guess that's my struggle is I feel very much the same. Like we're all just travelers, right? Through this life. It was like I said, this conversation I had over this weekend was really interesting because I was trying to sort out like part of me feels, I feel like it's appropriate for children to refer to adults as Mr. or Mrs. Um, we referred to my stepmother as, you know, Miss V, which was her last name. Um, Sorry, her last name started with a V, Mrs. V, and for 15 years before our parents got married. So I guess it's just, I don't know if it's part of how I was raised. Like, is my issue with that is how I was raised? And does there really need to be respect there? Can there still be that same level of respect there if it's a first name basis? Because to contradict what I'm just saying, I went to an absolutely amazing alternative high school in Colorado, and it's not like the alternative schools that you see a lot of today, which are just, I mean, just off the chain. Well, high schools in general are just off the chain. But it was fantastic. It was all about respect and dignity, and everybody there was on the first name basis. So all of the teachers, the principal, everybody, students, first name basis. And it really helped to develop this level of rapport. And yeah, it was fantastic. We didn't have fights at that school. There were classes on emotional health that everybody had to go through before that you would even be integrated into the regular school day. All you had was this one class for, I think it was 6 weeks. And it was just emotional health kind of stuff, anger management, emotional management, these kinds of things. And it was just a fantastic school. Everybody got along. I mean, it's like, so I don't know. I guess I need to explore that more. How do I really feel about that? Okay, let's see. To lead is to love says, what the heck? What school is this? LOL. It was seriously just the best experience ever. I loved it so much. It was called Centennial High School, and it was in Fort Collins, Colorado. And I, Bill was the principal at the time, Bill M. Pierce. And I guess I'd be surprised if he was still there, because I forget how old I am sometimes, but that was, 20 something years ago. So he might be retired by now. But everybody there was awesome. The teachers were great. I mean, it just was wonderful. There's kind of on topic, but off topic. If anybody's interested in something along the lines of that, there's uh, a book, audiobook. I highly recommend the audiobook. I think it's read by the author, and this guy has the most amazing voice, and it's just his voice is worth the book. It's just very relaxing. The book is called Making the Impossible Possible, and it's this true story of this guy. I think his name is Bill Strickland. Guy grew up in a really rough inner city during like race riots and all kinds of things, and just had an alcoholic father and real difficult life. He wasn't doing well in school. He didn't like school. And it was just through this guy's vision and kind of just through some strange twists and turns in life that he ended up becoming responsible for this school, basically. And I don't want to ruin it, but I guess me goosebumps and gets me all teary. It's such an amazing story. What he's able to do with his vision, and he's able to not only transform this school, but just the lives of pretty much everybody in this community. It's just so incredibly powerful, and it makes you realize, that, yeah, like there's things that we can do out there. We don't have to just live the status quo, that things can change and things can change for the better, and to not let people tell you otherwise. So it's a great listen. Highly recommend it. Yeah, Jen was saying, I went to a Montessori preschool, and we called our teacher by her first name. As an adult, I'm curious to know if there's if that high school that I went to, if that was based on like the Montessori principles, or like where they got the framework for their program, because it was just unlike anything I'd ever heard of even since. And it worked. And it worked with, we had a lot of kids that were, I mean, there was, I would say the vast majority of kids there, that was like their last chance kind of a place. But then there were those kids like me who just did not do well in crowds and around a lot of people, and were just kind of like highly sensitive. Um, so it was a wide range of people, but everybody was cool. It was great. New Beginning says, why do some narcissists end a relationship on good terms? I was triangulated with his new supply, but on the day of our split, our conversation, he was civil and wanted to stay friends for the kids. Why so nice at the end? If you've been triangulated before this kind of stuff, it's it's a trap. It's what it is in a nutshell. It sounds so jaded, I know, but generally they want to keep the door open. They want to they want to torture you some more, and they want to be able to they just want to be able to tell you about how happy they are with their new relationship, and and just kind of twist the knife a little bit more. And they're so glad that they're able to talk to you about these things, and then coming to you with relationship issues and pretend, like, oh, I really want you to be a friend and you mean so much to me. And just because they like seeing other people squirm, and they like inflicting pain. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons, but if a person's had a pattern of kind of being sadistic in the past, and that's what, in my opinion, that's what triangulation is, they're going to be sadistic in the future. So just keep your emotional shields up, and I wouldn't take any kindness as for face value. And it's okay too, if that kind of stuff does start up where, oh, I really want to be able to tell you about my new relationship. And aren't you so happy? Oh, we just bought tickets to go to Cancun and da 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 da. The more you show discomfort or irritation or hurt with that, and the more open and honest you are with your communication, the more they're going to keep doing it. So with people like this, everything that we talk about as far as communication goes is out the door. It's out the window with people like that. Like, you just enter bizarro world and you pretty much have to do the opposite. So with them, and because quote unquote normal person, they hurt your feelings, something happens, open, honest, sincere, solutions oriented communication. You're letting them know, you're being assertive. Hey, you know what? This really hurts my feelings. I don't really want to hear about your new relationship, blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, they feign innocence. Oh my goodness, I didn't realize you would be so hurt by that. And I just really feel like you need to move forward. And you just mean so much to me. And you're such a good friend, and blah, blah, blah. Don't fall for it, and don't show that you're hurt around a sadistic person. So play it cool. If you really want to kind of, and I don't recommend playing games, life's too short for this kind of stuff, but if you don't give a reaction, or if you give a supportive reaction, they don't know what to do with that. And they're often really caught off guard because they're expecting you to have a problem with it, because they're trying to feed off of your pain. Does that make sense? Okay, let's see here. Let me scroll up. Interested says, today I held the door open for someone who didn't even say thank you. It's the same sex. They didn't even grab the door on the way out and didn't say thank you. I just was so annoyed by it. Yeah, that's a pet peeve of mine too. And I have one thing that I've noticed lately too, and it's probably been like this for a long time, but I just have been recently noticing it, is how many women don't say thank you when somebody holds the door open for them. And especially if a man holds the door open, it's just kind of expected. And so I guess I'm trying to overcompensate for that. I always make it a point to say thank you to, well, to anybody who holds the door open, because it's just being polite is kind of a dying thing, but especially to guys that hold the door, because it's just, I can see why a lot of guys get frustrated with stuff like that. And they're like, well, geez, nobody even says thank you. Nobody even acknowledges. They expect this from me. So I'm just, I'm done. Yeah, that's so true. Jennifer says, I think when I was younger, I thought open communication wasn't necessary and almost uncool in a way. But now I know it's so necessary. Girl, I hear you. So spot on. Uh, I feel the exact same way. So hold on real quick. I guess I'm missing parts of the live stream. I guess if there's talk of religion and if it's really upsetting other people in the chat, you guys, can you please uh, just change the topic? Because a lot of people here have gone through spiritual abuse and are very, very, very sensitive to talk about religion at all. But back to what you're saying, Jennifer. Yeah, I felt the exact same way. That open communication, I would roll my eyes at it. Like, oh brother, give me a break. It's too touchy feely, too like, blah, like bleeding heart kind of stuff. And I thought that way for a very long time. Like, oh brother, just oh brother, give me a break. and now, and now that I have a healthier understanding of, I think, myself and of relationships, I understand that it's a necessary component. And we don't need to talk about everything, but we do need to be able to be present and listen to each other if there's issues that come up, and to not be so quick to just, disregard things that we don't understand or don't agree with. So yeah, so I hear you. Okay, let's see here. Mickey, you know what? You bring up a really great point, and that was for sure not what I intended to mean. So let me read this so I can address it. She says, "I don't think cheating means there's something wrong with the person who's being cheated on. I don't think it's right to blame them. It's the issue with the cheater. Happy, healthy people don't cheat." Absolutely, absolutely. And if if this relationship, you know, like, I would say by and large, the vast majority of time, healthy, happy people, they shut one door before they open another. They're not doing the kind of the monkey bar thing with relationships. If But I think at the same time, it's, I don't know, relationships, emotions can be tricky, and it can kind of get people in the tricky situations sometimes that they wouldn't normally do. And again, just by the level of guilt that Amani was experiencing, it just seems like this is not the kind of person she wants to be. This is not who she feels she is. And she just feels absolutely awful about what she's doing. And so if that's the case, then it's worth exploring, okay, what's going on here? Because if it is more of a I just don't like confrontation issue, and I don't know how to break up with the first person, or the first person has some great things about them, but I have stronger feelings for the second person, and oh my gosh, how did I get here, kind of a thing. It's still a problem, and it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with either of the guys. It means, it 100% means there's stuff that's going on inside of her that she needs to sort out and figure out what she's doing, because she's not just hurting them, she's hurting herself too. That's not a long-term strategy way to live with that level of guilt and, you know, all of that. It's just, it's something that needs some major decisions need to be made. Yeah, Jennifer says, I experienced that in my 9-year relationship with an alcoholic. I didn't know how to get out because our lives were so intertwined. And so I had an affair. It was not something I ever want to have happen again. It was very much a learning experience. Yeah, I have known people, um, I mean, my goodness, people do all kinds of things for all kinds of reasons. I knew someone whose husband was chronically cheating on her, and she was madly in love with him. She thought they were happily married, had been married for like 8 years. She and you would, if you would have seen them, you would have thought that they were very much in love. And she was just devastated when she found out about the first affair, which of course wasn't the first. There had been numerous ones over the years. And he got to the point where he had no remorse, he had no empathy. He wasn't even bothering to really hide these things anymore. And there was all kinds of women. It wasn't just this one, it was lots. And my friend was really torn. They had a little girl together, and she was like, she loved him and kind of was holding on to this false hope that he would come around and that she could have that fantasy again. And in order for her to stay, she ended up having a few affairs, and she had never had any desire to cheat on him. But I think in her mind, it was, yeah, it was so twisted. I think it was, she cheated not only to settle the score, but more so because then she couldn't blame him for everything. I think it was more of her way of, well, I'm not perfect either. He had an affair, and then so did I. Like, he's had multiple affairs and so have I. And therefore this is something that we can both work through. So it was more like the dysfunction was more balanced. And then it, of course, didn't work because she didn't want to have these affairs. She was, I don't know, was doing some mental gymnastics to convince herself that this could work out and that she could stay. And her husband just, I've never met anybody that's been more well, I guess that's not true. The first guy, Jack, was very much the same way. Just, what's the big deal? Like, just didn't, there was no empathy, there was no remorse, there was no acknowledgement that that was a problem. Very, very bizarre. I've experienced people who were profoundly unhappy and they just never thought that they would get divorced. And so then they had an affair because they knew that they couldn't live with themselves. They couldn't stay married if they'd had an affair because that would always be hanging over their head. And so it was their way to either get their partner to leave, to divorce them, or it was their way to push themselves out the door because they just couldn't handle the guilt. So people, it's worth exploring though. When we're acting in a way that we're not okay with, there's something more there, and it's worth exploring. And yes, it's not about the other person. It's about us. Either the relationship isn't working for us, it's run its course, it's, we find ourselves having different types of strong feelings for multiple people or whatever it might be. It's worth exploring, like, why we're not ending one before we're beginning another. Okay, so with that said, let's see here. Let me scroll down here. This chat is really, really interesting tonight. It's all over the place, which I enjoy. It's interesting to see what things people have on their minds. Let's see, cha-cha-cha. Watcher says, is talking a holographic multiverse and says, I wish there was a way to reach a narcissist. I've heard that nothing helps them. Therapy and aging makes them worse. Have you heard the same? I'd like to think that they can change. Well, I need to make a video about this. I keep saying that. But I do. uh, it, I'll just give the short rundown for that. But at the end of the day, any of us only change if we experience pain from our actions. If a person doesn't, this is why narcissists in particular and antisocial personality disorder people don't change, because their behavior works for them and they see no problem with it, because they're selfish and they're entitled. And they, in their mind, they should be able to do whatever they want to do and not have consequences. And if anybody sets boundaries or has consequences for them, then they feel like you're being mean to them. It's just a very warped very childlike way to view the world. And um, if anybody actually experience, I mean, if a person is, and here's the thing with people, it can be difficult to tell when a person's actually being remorseful or not. This is why I think it's so important that we just have deal breakers, because I'm sure you guys have seen on the news, you've got people that have committed all kinds of vicious crimes, you know, and they cry during their trial, or they say all the right things, or they do whatever, and it's all an act. It's all just to get a lighter sentence, or what have you. And but this is so they can say all the right things, they can even act the part for a little while until their real behavior then surfaces again. So this is why I think it's just so important to just have deal breakers that you just stick to, because if they're if they show you that there's really no conscience there, that's a problem. And that's not something that's easily fixed. It's not fixed. I wouldn't even risk trying to fix it. It's just a waste of time and it puts you in danger. So, but there's people here all the time, myself included. I think everybody that goes through something like this starts questioning. It's like when you have a health issue, when you go to WebMD, right? And you're reading all these symptoms, and then by the end of it, you're like, oh my God, I've got 14 different things wrong with me. It's the same thing when we're talking about, personality disorder kind of stuff. Um, it's very common for people to see some of this reflected in themselves. And in large part, it's because this is all normal human behavior. It's just the degree and frequency of it that's the problem. And so we all have some of these traits within us at certain times in our life and certain situations and circumstances. But if it's pervasive and persistent, that's not normal. That's a problem. So, but if a person's, because I would be concerned about the person who was engaging in these conversations, was learning about all of this, and didn't stop to question their behavior. I would be concerned about that, because I just think this stuff kicks up so many connections, and it just sparks introspection and all of this. And so people, I mean, I if I had a nickel for every time a person told me that they were terrified that they were a narcissist, or is narcissism contagious, and now they feel like they're a narcissist, and what's going on, and they feel like they have anger issues now, and this, that, and the other, and all of that's totally normal after abuse. It's normal to question these things. It's normal to feel that way. It's normal to even act that way. So, um, yeah, but if a person sees something in their behavior where they're like, you know what? Oh my goodness, I didn't realize this about me before, but I, I really want to change that. If a person's sincerely motivated to change something about their behavior, absolutely they can. But the challenge is from other people is this person actually sincerely motivated? Because of course manipulators will say, and will act the part for as long as they need in order to get what they want. So yeah. Okay, so let me scroll up here. Yeah, absolutely. To lead is to love says, yeah, if there's no consequences, we typically choose the easier or more convenient option. Oh yeah, absolutely. We all do that, right? We tend to choose the path of least resistance, and kind of that instant gratification, uh, you know, and that's, uh, It's kind of where that can absolutely be a problem. That's why it's good to have a moral compass. It's good to feel guilt. It's good. I mean, guilt is an emotion that lets us know when we're doing something wrong. If that guilt is in tune, there's a difference between guilt and shame. And there's a difference between appropriate guilt and inappropriate guilt. Appropriate guilt, we do something bad, we feel bad about it. Inappropriate guilt, we just feel bad about everything. We set a boundary, we feel bad about it. We say no, we feel bad about it. You know, um, like we just feel bad about everything. That's inappropriate guilt because we didn't do anything, but we just feel bad. So if we're doing something bad, we should feel bad about it. Like that's what that emotion is there. It's to signal to us, hey, we're acting out of alignment with our true self. Something needs to get into balance here. And that guilt, those feelings of agitation, frustration, anxiety, all of that's going to continue to grow until we take the necessary steps to get back into alignment with ourselves. That's the gift of our emotions, especially a lot of our unpleasant emotions. And they're there to help kind of keep us on the path. Okay, I don't, uh, hmm. Goku says it's kind of like rationalizing away the bad in other people by saying you are capable of the same and convincing yourself that if I can be redeemed, then so can they. Well, oh, there's so many good questions and conversations going on in the chat. Uh, I think it's really important that we realize that everybody's different. So we can see bad behavior in somebody else and acknowledge that and be like, boy, you know what? I was the exact same way when I was that age, or boy, I could see how they could do it. But to not think that they're somehow like broken versions, that they're not us, like they're not broken versions of us. So just because, so it's important that we're not projecting um our moral compass, our conscience, our desire to change, our morals and motivations on another person, because everybody is their own individual. This is very easy for us to do. And I think that's the default for most people, is especially people that are like us in some way, shape, or form. We're just kind of wired that way to, to, oh, this person, people do this all the time. Oh, she's a woman, right? Like if I'm a woman and she's a woman, I instantly feel safe or safer, or that I don't necessarily feel this way, but a lot of women do. Like, oh, I can trust her because she's a woman, or we're the same nationality or the same age, or we both had the same number of children, or we grew up in the same town, or we're the same religion. Whenever there's similarities between people, as human beings, we're wired to feel safe around people that are like us. And that can really get us into deep trouble. And a lot of con artists really rely on this, and they'll prey on these points of similarity. Religion is a big one, because people tend to really let down their guard because they think, oh, this person has the same morals and motivations as me. They're the same faith as I am. But it's saying that you have a belief in a certain faith and actually like living that faith are two very different things. So yeah, it's important that, we still have that level of discernment. This is also another way that this can get people into trouble, is if they're um, at a transitional point in their life where they're like let's say that they've done some stuff. There's so many ripple effects to acting out of um, to acting in a way that's problematic. Because the other downside to this is then we tend to be more inclined to be more forgiving of other people and to be more tolerant of other people's bad behavior, thinking, well, who am I to judge? Oh, this person, you start dating somebody, let's say, I don't know, um, whatever. I mean, you cheated, you lied, you stole, you did something, and then you find out that they tell you that they had done that. And if we're projecting our morals and motivations onto them, thinking, well, I'm still inherently a good person, this was a fluke thing, so it's probably the same for them. Or again, like who I see this a lot with people that are recovering from addiction of any kind, and that can really keep them stuck because they're thinking, well, yeah, I know I'm clean and sober, and this new person I'm really into, yeah, they drink more than I'm comfortable with, or they're doing drugs or pills or whatever it is, but I don't want to judge them because they're seeing their old self in that person, and they it's a weird way for them to kind of have compassion for their old self. But the problem is they're not in reality, and they're not making good decisions because they're having a relationship with their old self. So, like, gosh, aren't we wild the way things can get all the way we can think about things and just get all kinds of twisted up? It's wild. Let's see here. Let me scroll up here. Local tourists ask, why do women go for the selfish jerks so often? Well, I think a lot of the time selfish jerks don't necessarily come across as selfish jerks right out of the gate. There are those people, like, right, there are like those guys or those gals that are just insufferable, that are right out of the gate. And I think we all wonder that, right? Like, how did this person ever get married? How did they ever get a second date with anybody? Because their personality is just so aggressive and brash and just off-putting across the board, you know? Um, that I don't know. Like, I don't know why anybody is attracted to that. Uh, my guess is that they're meeting some sort of vulnerability within the other person. The person probably has low self-esteem and maybe not realize it. Um, the person's paying attention to them. And I think it tends to be the same kind of things, right? It's why does anybody get tangled up with a problematic person? 9 times out of 10, they don't come across as problematic right out of the gate. And um, it's kind of, you start to see problems over time, but if they're really intense, again, the stuff's not taught. I really feel like that's just a huge part of it. Because again, when the stuff is discussed and people get it, they tend to get it, and they tend to not get caught up. If they do get tangled up with another abusive or manipulative person, it's they see it a lot sooner than they did before, and they're much more able to walk away. But what happens if this is a slow thing? If the person's male or female coming across as, charming and charismatic and likable and attentive and, all of it, it comes across as this really healthy person and this ideal relationship, this really over the top kind of relationship. And then in time, that's when like the jealousy, the controlling behavior, the irrational demands and requests and bizarre on again, off again, push pull kind of fights kind of stuff starts surfacing, and things become rough. And a lot of people that are on the receiving end of that, they just start thinking, oh, there was a woman that did a TED talk about an abusive relationship and why she stayed. And she had said, she's like, it was basically that she thought she was, um, a woman who was just in love with a very damaged man, and that her love could heal him. And she just kind of thought eventually he'll come around and realize that I care about him, that you know, that he doesn't have to interact with me this way. And of course, he never did, because they never do, because they feel justified and entitled to verbally or physically just lash out at others. So, uh, yeah, so I think that people don't, there's all kinds of well-intended bad advice out there. Oh, commitment takes work and relationships take work, and, certain relationships are forever. And, um, you got to just be more understanding and more tolerant. And, people get hung up on bad advice. They stick around feeling like they need to make things work. They might have kids with this person. Their religion might dictate that they stay with them. Their finances might dictate that they stay with them. All kinds of things. The person might actually, I've heard quite a few times, person's absolutely great until they get married or until they have a baby. That's very common too. So, it's, yeah, challenging. Jennifer says, yeah, when she was in her relationship where we cheated on each other, we were both not happy or healthy. I was still not out of my childhood sexual abuse, and he was an alcoholic. And so our pain was just bubbling over. So, yeah, um, yeah, sometimes the way that people act, especially when it's compulsively or um, maladaptive, like I'm just a really big believer that whatever we're doing, we're trying to get some sort of need met. And the more out of alignment we feel, when we feel like we're beside ourselves, like that some sort of force overtakes us, and we're doing something that's just not in a way that we're normally like acting, that there's something going on there that's worth exploring. Because addictions feel like that. It feels like, this compulsive need to do things that we know are destructive. We're embarrassed by it, um, but we feel like we just can't stop. And it's kind of the same thing with any problematic behavior. But most people realize what they're doing is a problem, and they just try to deny it and deflect and justify it to themselves, which doesn't work for long. Uh, oh, Doug was saying, he says, I haven't moderated. He said, I was going to say something, but I haven't moderated here in a long time. Yeah, Doug, feel free to hop in. Like, you just pick up where you left off. If you want to, you know, say something, by all means. I trust your judgment. Let's see here. Ma Under is talking about love and that fairy tale Disney movie Love. And little girls are shown that Prince Charming is the right one, but in all honesty, he is the narcissist. Yeah, well, and then the flip side of that, right, is then little boys are kind of groomed to go for the damsel in distress. And that's a problem too, because then they're getting in, it's just this really toxic dynamics. Then you've got boys that are thinking that their job is to rescue women from their life, and that's a problem. And women are waiting to be, if women are subscribing to this, then they're waiting to be rescued. And it's, yeah, like that does not end well. What was it? Was it the movie Shrek? I think, where they joke about that, and the like the prince is just this insufferable narcissist. I think maybe it's more Pixar. Pixar tends to be, kind of catching on to just how ridiculous a lot of these tropes are with fairy tales, and kind of spinning them, which I like. I think it's entertaining. Okay, I think I'm like way behind in the chat. Yeah. And Ma Under was saying, you just can't base things on looks. Be beautiful on the inside, looks fade. Yes, I agree. And okay, Jennifer, you bring up a great point. She says, well, is the Prince Charming type really necessarily a bad thing, though? Like, as long as there's balance and respect to each other, what's wrong with being cheesy and lovey dovey? Nothing wrong with being cheesy and lovey dovey. The problem is when there's that imbalance. If it's the uh, if there's a rescuing involved, then there's an imbalance present. So, yeah, that's more of the issue. It's one thing to be loving and to be supportive of another person and to be romantic and to thoughtful and all of that. But if it's more of that one-sided dynamic where you're giving and giving and giving and giving to this person and it's emotionally exhausting and physically and financially and spiritually and every other way just exhausting you because you're trying to fix them or save them, then that, you know, imbalanced relationships don't work for long. They topple over. Mm, Mickey, I am so sorry. She says, I don't think I'm ugly, but my ex used to date models. He said I'm just not enough physically, so that's why he had to cheat. I haven't slept with anyone for years after my ex because I'm so scared they will bully me about my body like my ex did. I It breaks my heart when I hear things like that, and I've experienced some of that, and all it takes is like one or two just really hurtful comments that can cause just profound damage. And that's awful that anybody would say, I that you're not enough for me. That's why I had to cheat. That's ugly. There's no need. Like that's not true. First off, because if you weren't enough physically, then he wouldn't have been dating you. And second, there's no need to destroy somebody on your way out the door. That's just not okay. And you know, uh, I don't know, women and our bodies, I'm sure men have their own insecurities, and I'm sure, right? That that men have their own set of challenges with body image and things like that. I think women, I mean, I'm just speaking from experience. I know we definitely do, and there's a lot of like pressure and um, kind of pressure for our body to look a certain way uh, and all of that. But you know, everybody's body is different, and that's kind of the fun I think of being human is we're all just variations, right? Like there's differences there. That's what makes people unique, and that's if you're with the right person, it's they're going to love your body even more for all of the things that make you uniquely you. So it's seriously, it's it just becomes a non-issue with when you're with somebody that you really care about because it's more about and you're stunningly beautiful. If your profile picture is you, I mean, you're stunningly beautiful. Even if you weren't stunningly beautiful, what Bonnie, I think it was Bonnie, was saying, it's the inside. This is what we truly fall in love with is who this person is and how we feel around them. Have you if you've it's just like for example, one of my biggest crushes for like the longest time was Gene Wilder. I just absolutely adored him. I thought he was he is hilarious. Like that's not even debatable. Like he's hilarious. He is such a fantastic actor um and he was not what you would consider like traditionally handsome. But I was just so taken with his personality and the parts that he played in different movies, and uh, it had I loved all of his quirky physical characteristics because it was part of who he was. I just had such a massive crush on him. But, that's kinda how we are. When we really like somebody, they might think, "Oh, well, my hair is frizzy, and I don't like this, I don't like that," and we just think, "Oh, it's just," but it's part of you, and I like you, Like, I like the crooked teeth or the frizzy hair or the, whatever, the freckles or whatever we might have some sort of issue with, or they have some sort of issue with. It's endearing to us if we really care about them. So, oh, Jennifer, yeah, awesome. She says, "Oh, I love Gene Wilder. He was such a crush for me too. I was so devastated when he died, and it wasn't his looks; it was his genuine, lovely attitude." Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Huh. Yeah, Steve was saying it. Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor were my faves too. Yeah, Richard Pryor was great. I agree. Abs says, I think making comments about our appearance is part of their way of making us feel small and insecure. Yeah, absolutely. Yep, it's part of the way of keeping control. Normal people don't go around destroying other people. And for somebody to say something that damaging at the tail end is, I really feel it's important that we see that as a reflection of them and not as a reflection of you, because you know, that's outrageous. And like, everybody, just everybody's got, nobody's body is perfect, not even models. So, and it's all relative, it's all relative. There's people out there that find every type of feature you can imagine. There's somebody out there that finds it attractive. Some guys like short women, some like tall, some like blonde, some like brunette, some like black, some like white, some like, you know, super morbidly obese women, some like stick thin women, some like uh, really, domineering personalities, some like really demure personalities, some like women that really dress up, some like women that thankfully, thankfully, some like women that don't, and that like flip flops and shorts, and you know what I mean. It doesn't, just because somebody doesn't find something about your body attractive doesn't mean that there's something wrong with your body, really. Steve says, is it because narcissists think that they aren't enough, so they project it onto their victims? I think that's part of it. Um, I think in part it's also more, it's more of that entitlement. We all have opinions about things, but most of us have that level of emotional maturity to know that there's a time and place to say things and that not everything needs to be said. So we might even sincerely think something like, oh, that person's haircut looks awful. I don't know. Um, we might think that that's true, but other people might not think that that's true. And, but again, the emotional maturity, if we have emotional maturity, we realize that uh, we don't need to go tell somebody that their haircut looks awful. We don't need to go give unsolicited advice, and we don't need to go shame. Like, what's the point of telling a person that other than to try to ruin their day or week or, year? Like, why? Why would you do that? And maybe they like their haircut. it's opinion, right? So they might be saying, there's a lot of, like, they might be saying something with the intention of causing jealousy, insecurity, um, or being hateful or hurtful, trying to knock a person down because it makes them feel more secure, it makes them feel superior, or they're sadistic and they just enjoy hurting other people. Those are all very common, very prominent things with kind of high conflict people in general. Or it could be that they really just have opinions about things and they just feel entitled to just say whatever comes across their mind. Uh, but it's so strange because they would be horrified if you were to do the same to them. But that just speaks to their level of entitlement, which is it's so wild to see an adult do that. Like they could tell you how they don't like your shirt and that it's not flattering on you, and they don't like your haircut and this, that, and they'll pick you apart. But if you were to say something even similar to them, they would be enraged and so offended at how rude you're being. Because in their mind, they're just telling the truth. But if you do it to them, then you're bullying them, because in their mind, they don't have a problem with their haircut or their t-shirt or their, you know what I mean? It's just a matter of perception on their end, where for narcissists, they're always right. So there's never any, to them, they're always like, they're just always right. And everybody else is always wrong. And that they're always justified and entitled doing what they want to do. But nobody else is, it's just them. Steve asked, do narcissists know they're narcissists? Yeah, I would agree with Jack. Excuse me. Jack says, a few do, most don't. Yeah, and I would honestly, and I would say that some, sorry, I just have like a tickle in my throat here. Well, hopefully that's gone. BGD was saying, you know, there are some narcissists online. You can look up the different self-aware narcissists. I would say probably the vast majority of those people are, I don't know. I think people that tend to be self-identified narcissists and really wear it like a badge of honor, that's more kind of histrionic than anything. And or and I think a lot of the time they read about this and they see this behavior and they're like, oh my gosh, that's totally me. But then they read that they can't change. And so, like we were talking about earlier, it's this identity foreclosure, and then they just steer into it. And they're like, I can't do anything. I'm just a narcissist. And, you know, I just cheat and lie. And so I mean, yeah, it's silly. You know, if you're motivated to change your behavior, you can change it. And if you're kind of by definition, narcissists aren't self-aware. Like that's the problem, is they're not self-aware. There's a complete lack of emotional intelligence. And same with antisocial personality type people, like sociopaths and psychopaths. Like psychopaths, well, even some sociopaths, they might be aware that they just don't care, but they want to do what they want to do. But I would say the vast majority of time they justify it. Like it's very few and far between where you'll really truly, I mean, I can only think of one person I've encountered over the years who completely didn't even try to put on an act and had no remorse for his for his behavior. And enjoyed upsetting people and kind of wanted an audience and all of that. The vast majority problematic people I've worked with have been, you know, they they're more charming, and they try to do and say all the things that they need to do and say in order to get people, keep people lured in. But I don't know. I guess it's hard to say what other people really know or feel because we're not them. Jennifer says, is it just narcissists that can't change, or is it all cluster B personality disorders? I mean, really, at the end of the day, it's just anybody, nobody can change unless they experience pain from what they're doing. So you get, I mean, like, there's things out there, like disorders out there that we know have a cure. There's cures for heroin addiction. There's cures for anorexia. There's cures for um, I don't know, compulsive gambling. There's cures for these things. But just because there's a cure doesn't mean that a person's ever going to change. Like a person, that's what's so scary. And this is why with people that, and this is, I guess I'm just trying to make a parallel here, but people with extreme behavior is the common denominator here. But if a person doesn't experience pain, then there's no sincere desire for them to change. But what can be so scary is, with addiction, we've all heard of, it's really important that the person doesn't have enablers and that they are allowed to hit rock bottom, that you stop bailing them out, you stop calling in sick for them, you stop making up excuses for them, you stop loaning them money, stop letting them crash at your place, you stop driving them home from the bar, you stop all that. And you've got to let them suffer consequences. That's why. So when they suffer consequences, when they sit in jail, they get a DUI, their spouse leaves them, like they suffer pain from their actions, then and only then will they have the wake-up call that something needs to change. So, but that's what's so scary, because for some people, they never hit that rock bottom and they end up dying. And but there's nothing that we can do. If a person doesn't want to change, they see no problem with their behavior, they blame everybody else, they're not accountable for it, they minimize it, they justify it, they're a million miles away from changing. So it's not just, narcissist or cluster B, it's any of us with anybody's behavior. But that's why narcissists and those with antisocial personality disorder, everybody's able to change certain things about them, but only what they experience pain with. So like a person with, I don't know, narcissism or antisocial personality, they might get sober, they might, I don't know, lose a ton of weight, they might go back to college, they might make changes in their life. But if they are a pathological liar or cheater or whatever, and they sincerely see no problem with that, they're not going to change that. So they might change some things, but they're not going to change the things that they don't have a problem with. If that makes sense. This is why it's so important to have deal breakers and to just know when is enough enough for you. Because, not everybody's interested in changing. And just because there is a cure, I see this a lot with people that have, their partner might have borderline personality disorder, or they're wondering, well, I don't know, I heard people with borderline personality disorder can change. And so, my partner, I thought they were a narcissist, but no, they were just diagnosed with borderline. So that means they can change. So then that means I should stay in the relationship, and then they're going to get into therapy and DBT, and they're going to change. They're eventually going to be the partner that I need them to be sometime down the road someday, because I was told that narcissists don't change, but people with borderline personality disorder can. And that's really troubling thinking, because, change takes a long time, and it's generally, a porcupine doesn't become a kitten. So change is possible. But if it's really outrageous, egregious, deal breaker behavior that you're experiencing, you're better off just walking away, and not holding on to hope, because that person that behavior is there because healthy, well-adjusted behavior isn't. And for that person to kind of unlearn all of that, develop new coping methods, learn new ways of interacting with the world, a new mindset, all of that, that's quite the project. And if that person already struggles with accountability or experiencing pain from their behavior, like change requires ongoing introspection of what's working, what's not working, and why. And so we need to have that like chronic level of discomfort in order to keep moving forward in the process of change. So even if a person says, "Oh, I'm really sorry. I don't know, I stole money from you, or I cheated on you, or I did whatever." If people say things in the moment, but if there's no like, changing in the behavior, if there's no, you know, like if things don't change, then there's a problem, and they're not motivated to change. So yeah, I think it would be difficult. Ricky says, would it be harsh to generalize politicians as narcissistic? I think different. I don't know. Are we talking about American politicians? I think it's kind of a different breed than from politicians. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I think some people get into politics because they really want to change the world, and that's not narcissistic. They're just passionate people. Uh, I really feel. I really. I don't mean to open up this ball of politics here, but I really liked John McCain. I thought he was a really solid guy, and I feel that his intentions were sincere. There's a few politicians here and there where I just feel like, yeah, that person seems really passionate, and I might not even agree with the changes they want to make or the way they want to go about making them, but I feel like their intentions are sincere versus other ones where like, oh boy, this person's just in it for the fame or the money or the power or whatever. I think it's any high profile. You could say that about any high profile position out there. So Jennifer says, so most likely histrionics won't change. Not unless they're motivated to. They got to have sincere, ongoing motivation. And it's, I think the challenge with highly dramatic people is, and overly sexualized people is they get the reaction they want. So, you know, I think like a good example, well, maybe not a good example, but like the character of Peg Bundy in Married with Children. There's kind of this overly sexy, dramatic, kind of provoking wife. Not just, and men can be histrionic too. She's just the first person, the character that popped into my mind. That kind of stuff, where it's just so attention seeking and all the time and all these different types of ways. As long as a person's getting the reaction they're wanting and there's no motivation to change. And they tend to, and because they get, and that's the thing too, is when you get used to, this is how I get my needs met, right? We all, our brain, grooves are made when we're used to doing something a certain way. This is why it's so difficult to start or stop a habit. Is there's these patterns, these deep grooves that have run in our brains of this is how I do things. And when a person doesn't realize that they have a problem, and let's say a person is really like that highly sexualized thing, and that works great for them up until they hit a certain age or what have you, and then people, they're not getting the reaction they want anymore. Odds are they might change a little bit, but it's still going to be looking for that dramatic response, but just in a different way. So they might tone down how they dress, or they might even get even more outrageous with their style of dress and think, well, I'm really going to give them something to talk about, kind of a thing, It's I don't know. I just am a big fan of have people in your inner circle that, you know, don't date for potential, don't be friends with a person for potential, like being in the moment, being fully present. And is this the kind of, is this person, is this dynamic nourishing? And is there that sense of mutuality there? You can rely on them, they can rely on you. Is this healthy for both people involved? And um, you know, is like you're not you're not with them for who they could possibly become maybe someday. You're with them for who they are today. Because today who they are is nourishing. That's all any of us can do. So okay. So with that said, I also wanted to remind you guys tomorrow is book club. 6:30 p.m. Eastern time, book club. And we are a week late because I took a little mini vacation. Uh, Anyways, we're going to be discussing this book, The Confidence Game by Maria Konnikova. And I think it'll make for an interesting conversation. So I hope you guys join us 6:30 tomorrow night. I am actually going to go ahead and sign off because I'm losing my voice. So I love you guys. Take care. Thank you so much for being here. I hope we do this every Wednesday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We normally end with a meditation. But like I said, I don't know how much longer my voice is going to hold. So I will see you guys tomorrow night, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And as always, just lots of love to you guys. You are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care and good night.